This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. Today, I want to bring to your attention this cover story from the U.S. tabloid magazine Aitch Weekly. By now, I think we all understand that anytime we see these kinds of stories in these tabloids, we know that it's the propaganda machine for the Sussexes that's pushing this stuff out. This cover story is no different, but I'll tell you this much, it's not coming from Meghan or Harry, and I'll show you why I think that. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's pretty much rehashing what happened with the BBC interview as well as Harry losing his court case. However, there is a part of this article that should be heard because there is one piece that I want to spotlight and go into, and you'll understand why in a second. Now, the reason why I look at these articles is not because I enjoy the gossip. It's because there's always something in these articles that help you understand the motivation or the purpose of doing it. Let me now show you by reading some of this. So we'll begin this article with the second column where it's titled Pointing Fingers. And yet, Harry insisted he's finally ready to make peace. In quotes, I can forgive my family's involvement, my father, my brother, my stepmother, for so many things that have happened. I have moved past that. The prince, who had previously demanded apologies from the royals for their treatment of him and his wife, Meghan Markle, 43, leading up to their 2020 Megxit, told the BBC. What I'm struggling to forgive is that a decision that was made in 2020 is knowingly putting me and my family in harm's way. The firm, led by his father, tried to use security as quote-unquote leverage to get them to stay, he alleged. But once they realized that wasn't going to work, that we are happier outside the institution, please just look at the facts, Harry, 40, said. If anything was to happen to me and my wife or my father's grandchildren, look where the responsibility lies. The prince always worries about reliving the tragic fate that befell his late mother, Princess Diana, he said, before ominously adding, through this disclosure process, I've discovered that some people want history to repeat itself, which is pretty dark. So far, what you can see is that the first half of this article is purely just a summarization of what went on in the BBC interview. So now we're going to get into who is behind this article and their intent. The palace has insisted their and Charles's hands were tied. All these issues have been examined repeatedly and meticulously by the courts, with the same conclusion reached on every occasion. His reps said in a statement, Harry challenged that assertion, noting that the king, 76, has a representative on the committee that made the decision to remove his security after he stepped back from his royal duties. As the fifth person in the line to the throne, Harry was born into his worldwide fame, and the risks don't just go away because he's not a working royal. He argued, I will never be seen as a private citizen. Though he refused to divulge his exact safety concerns due to national security issues, Harry noted that one al-Qaeda terrorist plot against his family had already been thwarted. The threats and risks to the Sussexes may even increase for various reasons. Security expert Richard Aitch tells Aitch, calling the situation an unprecedented quagmire, because it would be incomprehensible that the UK taxpayer would ultimately foot the bill to protect Harry and Meghan when they have their own commercial ventures. Harry claimed that the bill was around $2 million a year, far less than the $25 million that had been reported, a figure Aitch also calls excessive. And Harry's offer to pay the bill himself was also rejected. Why is private security inadequate when it seems to work for the Sussexes in California? Part of the issue involves weapons laws. Unlike the UK, private security personnel in the US can meet the immediate armed threat like for like. Aitch, author of the book Close Protection, tells Aitch, though he adds that there is still a huge advantage to having government-backed protection officers who have access to the whole host of intelligence flows from diverse agencies. And I'm going to stop there. Now, it's my opinion, but the person who is behind this article is Richard J. Aitch on behalf of Harry and Meghan. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and speculate that this guy had been advising Prince Harry and working with Prince Harry and coaching him on what he should be saying in his court case, as well as also in that BBC interview when it came towards getting Yvette Cooper involved, as well as putting some sort of rule or law in place when it came towards governance with Rayvac, and said that he was going to be pursuing it. And that's all because of this guy. I mean, how many people do you know that specialize in pushing for regulation in the UK government when it comes to close protection services? If you're going to go to somebody, this is the guy to go to. So understanding now what was behind Harry's interview in the messages that he was trying to get out. And one of those messages was pushing for this so-called legislation now. And let me tell you a little bit more about this Richard J. Aitch. So Richard J. Aitch is the chairman and founder of this not-for-profit organization in the UK called the Committee on Standards in Close Protection. Created and founded in December of 2024, its purpose is to provide direction and guidance in the future development of close protection training standards and to steer regulatory reform in the United Kingdom. Richard Aitch is also the author of the Close Protection book, which is a protections operations tactical doctrine for the commercial environment. And we'll get to that in a second, but a little bit about Richard Aitch and his expertise. 30 years experience with provision of close protection, Richard has served in both the Parachute Regiment and the Close Protection Unit, Royal Military Police, before taking the natural career transition into the private sector. He has personally provided close protection to British ambassadors and UK special envoys, several members of the British and Saudi royal families, members of parliament, personal bodyguard to 2 general officers commanding British forces in Northern Ireland, A-list celebrities, CEOs, ownings of world-leading companies, and one of the most powerful and influential former Forbes top 10 business leaders in the world today. The addition of operating within the private sector for over 25 years enabled him to be experienced in all matters concerning the protection of persons specifically at risk and the physical security of major corporations, governmental and military buildings, compounds, and private estates. He has managed and led protective security operations in over 60 countries across 6 continents in all threat environments, in addition to managing covert surveillance operations worldwide. Often sought after by various media outlets, he has been interviewed several times live on Sky News and LBC Radio with coverage in ITV News, CBS News, The Guardian, The Daily Mail, The Daily Express, Us Weekly, Cosmopolitan, and all media linked to the Associated Press regarding close protection, counterterrorism, security incidents, and protection operations, provision concerning the UK Prime Minister, the British royal family, including the Queen's funeral, Meghan and Harry, the Pope, and the accuracy concerning acting performance as to the provision of close protection and bodyguards for theater, film, and television productions. He was headhunted to be global head of security for a prominent business figure for 20 years and continues to remain operational throughout the provision and management throughout all aspects of protective security as co-founder and director of operations for a specialist niche security firm. Since the introduction of the United Kingdom's government licensing apparatus for commercial close protection in the UK in 2006, he has been infuriated and widely outspoken regarding the core competency framework of the National Occupational Standards, NOS, and recognition of prior learning as set out by British Government Security Industry Authority. Soon after the imposition of SIA training and licensing, he subsequently authored a research report, an examination of the required operational skills and training standards for close protection operative in the United Kingdom, and for the following 16 years, persistently lobbied for changes directly to the Home Office, the Home Secretary, the Cabinet Office Better Regulation Executive, the Parliamentary Undersecretary Minister for Safeguarding Skills for Security, and the SIA themselves. So now when we go back to Richard's organization that he started in December of 2024, the Committee on Standards for Close Protection, essentially what he is trying to do is to get a legal framework or regulatory framework pertaining to security services for the elite. That's essentially what he's doing. So in their mission right now is to essentially force the Home Office to put parameters and considerations when it comes to training and qualification, as well as access to certain surveillance. When you take a look at the people who are part of this organization, you'll recognize that they're all former royalty protection officers or Metropolitan Police. In fact, there's one who is on this committee who is still working with the Metropolitan Police Royalty and Specialist Protection Group. In my opinion, I would think that this would be somewhat of a vulnerability and a breach in security for if he is serving the royals. By being a part of this, you shouldn't be working with a private sector group specializing in developing security parameters and regulation and designing a framework when you're working with and have access to intelligence systems. That's just my opinion. I feel like there's a tremendous conflict of interest here. So according to their website, the justification for why there needs to be regulatory reform in this niche market for private security, they say, as the potential for real danger in the UK and comparatively elsewhere on a day-to-day basis, although present, seldom arises, there becomes an absence, a void of any historical hostile incidents whereby the outcome in terms of harm, physical injury, or death could be attributed to the inadequacy of personnel performance on the part of the close protection to provide any evidence to justify standards change. Furthermore, theoretically, the difference between those job functions where direct action is conducted to fulfill a mission, attackers, and those conducted to prevent the impact of direct action, protectors, is such that the former is evidenced by an actual physical result, whether successful or not, whereas the latter is not, unless an attack has occurred, which is rare. Given the infrequency of hostile incidents compared to the number of close protection operations conducted, any lack of operational performance then is not identified, not seen, not tested. Poor delivery and performance in training is also not identified, not seen, and not tested when all these points are in play. This consideration remains critical in the determination of whether or not the current standard is fit for purpose and whether evidence exists to justify change. I'm not really sure what they're trying to get at by doing this, whether it be to open up the market for allowing the private sector to be able to have this type of protection services where companies or rich people can pay for it. Essentially, that's the vibe that I'm getting from this. Because, why would you push for regulatory reform unless you were trying to make a profit somehow? And in this case, I believe that this is where this guy is going, because otherwise, why would you do this? What's really stupid now, when you go back and you listen to Harry and he's like, oh, I can't talk about it because of national security and blah, blah, blah. Well, here we have this organization outlining pretty much what is required to be a royal protection officer, because when they list all the things that are not present right now for the private sector, I think it would be safe to assume that these are the assessments and tests that these royal protection officers, as well as the Met Police, have to go through in order to qualify to be employed as one. So by them outlining the lack of standardization and the lack of tests, and considering that a lot of these committee members are former royal protection officers, I'm going to assume that they are aware that these are the requirements and are looking to have something similar in the private sector. The other thing that was retarded about Harry's court case is, going back to this In Touch Weekly article where they said that Harry did not outline what those security concerns were, meaning Harry did not want to disclose the types of threats that he was facing because I guarantee a lot of that stuff was either embellished or fabricated. We know how Harry and Meghan love to lie. What's so silly to me is how Harry and his lawyers wanted to make sure that the public did not know how Harry was being protected. All right, fine. You don't want people to know how many security guards you have or what they do. That's fine. But don't act like that's something that only the upper echelon can get to know, because you know what? This guy, Richard Aitch, wrote a whole book on how to handle every single situation, to which it sounds like this book is being used as the so-called handbook or playbook for government protection units that are responsible for the protection of presidents, prime ministers, and heads of state all around the world. In fact, it says here at the bottom, due to the sensitive nature of its content, this book remains the only one concerning close protection that was required to be submitted to the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defense. So if that doesn't tell you that the UK government is using this book to train and certify the actual royal protection officers and police, then I don't know what else does. So now, when you go back and you listen to some of the things that Harry was saying about his security case, it all starts to make sense as to why he was positioning to write to Yvette Cooper, and also why he didn't feel that the security that he was getting was sufficient enough, especially if in the back of his mind he's thinking that these people aren't qualified because they weren't required to take certain tests and XYZ as outlined here. And on top of it, this guy has been very vocal about Harry's court case. And, I'm surprised none of us have talked about him before because he has been active on X. He has been putting out articles. He has been speaking to the media. It is clear that Harry has been working with him. I mean, come on now. The guy is doing interviews with the Sussex squad. Now, the reason why I felt that this guy was important to bring awareness to was because of him making a point in the In Touch Weekly article to say that it's a huge advantage to have access to the intelligence from several agencies. And we know the agencies that they're talking about. This guy could have talked about the qualifications or the level and skill set of the Royal Protection Officers versus the private side of it, because they make a case here in their website. But no, he chooses to say the advantage is having this access to intelligence. And that really did make the hairs on my arms stand up, because Harry really doesn't need this security. It's that intelligence is what they're after. This was a true blessing that Harry lost his security, because had Harry been able to overturn it and Ravak have to do their process over again and give Harry this RMB, guess who would have been most likely part of that RMB? It would have been Richard Aitch, because he is one of the best in the UK when it comes to close protection services, especially with the so-called VVIPs and royals. One needs to ask, what's in it for Richard Aitch? Now, when you go to his X account and you look at the people that he's following as well as the people that are following him, it's a little eye-opening, in my opinion. Starting off with the people that are following him, we have the Sussex squad, probably one of the most vile ones, this Benji Cannell parody, I'm going to harass, according to Taz, all day long account. You also have Jazapan, who's another asshole. These are just to name a few. But when you look at the people that Richard Aitch is actually following, and it's not that many, that should raise some concern. What's really strange, for the most part, the majority of people he's following are from the tabloids or the media. Like Us Weekly and The Sun. But then, sticking out like a sore thumb, is Christopher Steele. Now, I hope everybody knows who Christopher Steele is, right? Considering that Richard J. Aitch only is following 241 people, and Christopher Steele being one of them, I find it a little bit sus, especially since 240 other people that this guy is following belong to the media and tabloids. I'm just saying. Christopher Steele was former MI6, and you know what he did with that dossier, and how he colluded with Perkins Coie, who was doing work on behalf of Hillary Clinton and the DNC. We don't need to rehash the corruption and lies of the left, but you see who we're dealing with. Prince Harry and Meghan belong in the swamp with all of them. And if this guy is being very vocal in supporting Harry, then I definitely don't trust him. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that this guy has been supporting and working with Harry. Otherwise, he would not have been in this week's USA tabloid In Touch Weekly. You know what I mean? If I had to speculate, it will be this guy who's going to Yvette Cooper to lobby to do some reform around Ravak and the rules of it. Sounds like this is the path that they're taking right now. I mean, why else would this guy pop up out of nowhere and Harry be talking about, putting laws and regulations in place? I swear, all these people make me sick. You can't trust any of them. I'm going to tell you this right now. This security situation with Harry is not over yet. I'm going to go ahead and place my Vegas bet and say that Harry and Meghan will stage some type of catastrophic event They're not going to get hurt, but they'll put other people in danger. You watch. All to prove the point on why Harry needs to have his security back. And it will be this guy who's going to go to UK Parliament to lobby for them to start the framework and put parameters and standards in place. I have this feeling that this is what they're going to do. That's just my guess. But what do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I will talk to you later. Bye.
Such a fraud.